Chapter 378, Jade Saint. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Previously, when Kayao had given the Abyss Ancient Sword to Zhang Yuochen only knew that it was made of special material and had powerful strength, but he never expected it to be forged out of natural divine iron. Kayao must have made two swords when she first acquired the natural divine iron. One of them had been given to Zhang Yuochen, and the other had been left for herself. Why would Kayao give him such a precious sword? Was it because of love? If it was love, then why did she kill Zhang Yuochen with her own hands? It is too difficult to understand her thought. Suddenly, countless thoughts filled Zhang Yuochen's mind. He became even more confused. Lu Fanshan stared at the broken sword in Lu Xuan's hand. He asked her doubtfully, "Girl, you must have seen wrongly. This the blood drop sword?" "Of course not." Lu Xuan rolled her eyes and said, "Legends say that the blade of the blood drop sword used to be as white as polished jade. It contains divine vital essence and could devour blood of humans and savage beasts to raise its grade. Later, the sword turned into a blood red one, for it was stained with the blood of millions of people. Given its strength, once the sword is drawn, blood clouds will appear in the sky that would spread out for tens of thousands of miles." Lu Fanshan was more confused and asked, "You just said that only Empress Kayao had gotten a piece of natural divine iron in the whole Kunlun's field. But how can there be another sword which was made of natural divine iron? Besides, it's a broken sword." "Are you sure you are not mistaken?" Lu Xuan's fingers gently touched her chin, and she said, "I have some doubts, too. However, the material of this broken sword is the same as the natural divine iron that the canon of ritual items described. According to the legend, when Empress Kayao cast the blood drop sword, she called upon 10 of the best weapon refiners in the Kunlun's field. It took them 81 days to successfully forge the sword in the Sun and Moon Pool, and the ancestor of our sword Sanctum was one of the 10 weapon refiners. Since that's the case, I'll take the broken sword to see our great-grandfather. Maybe he'll know some secrets." Lu Fanshan nodded his head and said, "It seems like that would be the best choice for now." And then, he turned his eyes to Zhang Yuochen again. He was more curious about Zhang Yuochen's identity. Was he not a student of the school of the martial market or a disciple of the Tji doctrine, but an envoy that Empress Kayao sent? As Lu Xuan was prepared to return to Sword Sanctum with the Abyss Ancient Sword, she suddenly stopped and turned around, asking, "Hey, what's your name? And tell me the poem you said earlier." "I'll help you ask Zhang Yuochen." Zhang Yuochen then read out the poem. "No one knows that I'm in the deep forest, only the moon accompanies and sends me light." "Thank you, lady. Just call me Lu Xuan." Hee. A silvery laughter rang, and then Lu Xuan disappeared in the sacred mountains with a few moves. Lu Fanshan still stood in place. He curiously stared at Zhang Yuochen and asked, "Zhang Yuochen, why have I never heard this name before? With your power, you shouldn't be unknown." "Is this your real name?" Zhang Yuochen said, "I don't need to use a fake identity. It will be easy to find out my true identity with the influence of the Sword Sanctum." Lu Fanshan nodded and continued to say, "Your strength is not weak, but your realm of cultivation is a little bit low. If we really fight each other, you may not be able to withstand 10 strikes from me." It was unnecessary and impossible to conceal his identity in front of a master like Lu Fanshan. He had already roughly understood the stage of Zhang Yuochen's realm through the previous fight. On the other hand, Zhang Yuochen had also guessed Lu Fanshan's strength. He was indeed a powerful opponent. Previously, Lu Xuan had said that he was able to rank in the top 10 warriors of the young generation in the eastern region. It was probably not a lie. Sword Sanctum, Jade Saint Divine Mountain. Jade Saint Divine Mountain was the lord of the 18 sacred mountains. The owner of these sacred mountains was Lu Huai, who was called Jade Saint. The gray-haired and wrinkled Jade Saint looked like he was already in his 80s or 90s. He was so thin that his bones were protruding out his skin. However, his eyes, as bright as the stars, seemed like they contained infinite wisdom and emit light like some holy deity. Holding the Abyss Ancient Sword, Jade Saint was so excited that his hands kept trembling. He muttered, "No one knows I'm in the deep forest, only the moon accompanies and sends me light. No one knows I'm in the deep forest, only the moon accompanies and sends me light. Jade Saint repeated the poem 3 times, then he calmed down. He placed the Abyss Ancient Sword on the stone table beside him. Then he expectantly gazed at Lu Xuan and asked, "What's his name? How old is he? What else did he say?" Lu Xuan politely kneeled in the center of the holy temple and she slightly looked up. It was her first time to see her ancestor being so excited. Ancestor was a saint who had already lived for more than 400 years. How could he be so excited over something like this? Next to her, her grandfather, Lu Jinyun, and great-grandfather, Lu Chongyu, were also reverently kneeling in the holy temple. Lu Jinyun immediately stared at Lu Xuan as he found that Lu Xuan had not answered the ancestor's questions. He lowered his voice and asked, "Xuan, the ancestor is asking you a question. What are you daydreaming for?" After hearing his words, Lu Xuan shivered and immediately kowtowed to the ancestor. She quickly replied, "Ancestor, the man's name is Jiang Yuochen. He's probably about 20 years old." When Jade Saint heard the name Jiang Yuochen, he slightly frowned and pondered. After a moment, it seemed that he had thought something and his face changed. How could it be this name? Light of wisdom shone from his eyes. He asked again, "Where is he?" "He is in Sword Stealer," Lu Xuan answered. Jade Saint said, "Immediately invite him to Jade Saint Divine Mountain. Treat him politely and don't give him the cold shoulder." He seemed to feel a little uneasy and added, "Lu Chongyu, you go to pick him up. You must remember that don't let outsiders see him and directly bring him to me." After Lu Chongyu left, Lu Xuan and Lu Jinyun also walked out of the holy temple. Lu Xuan stuck her tongue out. She felt a little puzzled and said in a low voice, "Grandpa, who is that man?" Ancestor gives him so much honor that he ordered great-grandfather to pick him up personally. Lu Jinyun looked serious and said, "Xuan, the man's background is probably stronger than we thought. Ancestor just sent me a message to tell me to keep the secret." Lu Xuan showed an unbelievable look with her mouth wide open. The figure of Jiang Yuochen appeared in her mind again. She felt a little uncomfortable and muttered, "He seemed to have nothing extraordinary except for his handsome face." A moment later, led by Lu Chongyu, Jiang Yuochen came to the holy temple of Jade Saint Divine Mountain and saw the Jade Saint, Lu Huiyu. Lu Chongyu went out and there were only Jiang Yuochen and Jade Saint in the holy temple. Jade Saint carefully looked Jiang Yuochen over. After a while, he asked, "Are you from Ming Hall?" Ming Hall was a force that established by the old subordinates of Emperor Ming. Like the moon-worship demonic sect, Ming Hall had always been active in Kunlun's field and kept fighting against the rule of Empress Kaiyao. However, the power of Ming Hall was mainly distributed in 9 provinces of Middle-earth. Its power in the east, south, west, north was relatively weak. Therefore, the influence of Ming Hall in eastern region was not so strong. Although Jiang Yuochen did not come into contact with the people of the Ming Hall, he knew of its existence. So he was not surprised that the Jade Saint asked him this. Jiang Yuochen answered, "I'm not from the Ming Hall." Jade Saint said, "If you're not from Ming Hall, how do you know the poem?" Jiang Yuochen looked up. The old man sitting above was not his 6th elder brother, Lu Yuanzai. Therefore, he was still defensive and dared not to speak his own identity. Jiang Yuochen thought for a while and said with obeisance, "I have some private reasons, so I'll only answer some questions in front of Elder Lu Yuanzai." Jade Saint frowned slightly and said, "Lu Yuanzai is my grandfather. You may not know, but he passed away 300 years ago." "What?" "He has died." Although Jiang Yuochen had already expected this result, he was still sad when Jade Saint told him. 800 years had passed. Time had brought a great change to the world. Even a saint would reach the end. Jade Saint continued to say, "Now, I'm the master of Sword Sanctum. If you have any problem or message, you can directly tell me. Perhaps I could help you." It was impossible for Jiang Yuochen to tell Jade Saint his identity because he only trusted his 6th elder brother, Lu Yuanzai. "Can I trust other people?" What happened in the past had been too odd. Even Jiang Yuochen's lover had killed him personally. Who else he could believe? And Kaiyao had been reigning for 500 years. The force of the imperial court was uncontended under the heavens, sweeping away all disobedience and ruling the whole wide world. How could Jiang Yuochen easily expose his identity? Jiang Yuochen took a deep breath and bowed again. He said, I just come to repair my sword. There is nothing else. Disappointment appeared in Jade Saint's eyes. He looked at the broken sword, and then he laughed and said, I would like to ask, where did you get this broken sword? Zhang Yuochen replied calmly, I found it in the martial market of Yunwu Commandery. I bought it for its special material. Then I asked many weapon refiners to repair it, but they all failed. And I just heard of that sword sanctum is a holy land of refining weapon, so I come here to visit Master Lu, wondering if he can help me. But I didn't think that Master Lu had died 300 years before. Jade Saint said, it means that you didn't know the sword was made of natural divine iron before today? Yes. Zhang Yuochen replied. Jade Saint smiled and said, Sword Sanctum also participated in the process of casting the sword. I know some secrets about natural divine iron and the sword. Do you want to know? Zhang Yuochen knew that the Jade Saint was deliberately testing him.